Hello guys, this video was inspired by your questions and one of the recent interviews of the President Zelensky where he tried to persuade the White House and a lot of people outside Eastern Central Europe that we Ukrainians understand the Russian mindset way better than many of you. This does not make us smarter. It is the result of our geographical location and these hundreds of years of history. And by the way, that is not a very lucky geographical position when you neighbor Russia. Ask not just Ukrainians, ask people in Finland, ask people in Poland, ask people in the Baltic countries. But it is super important to build your assumptions, to build your forecasts for the future of the war based on some understanding, some real knowledge about the Russian mindset and what rules their decisions, why do they keep choosing people like Putin or Stalin as their leaders. Can you actually name me at least one Democrat in the Russian history? And I'm not just speaking about the 21st or 20th century history, I mean in general. And that is why I've decided to record this video as a friendly conversation with you, where I will share some of my knowledge and some of my observations that can help you in future, somehow decode the messages coming from the Kremlin and understand them the way they mean, not the way you filtering it through your healthy democracy experience see it. Actually, when I started vlogging in general, one of my missions that I set was to become some kind of translator from this part of the world to every corner where you are lucky to live far away from Russia and you don't know a lot of things. But as they continue attacking not just Ukraine, but your countries in a hybrid way, I'm sure these observations will be useful to anyone, even if you live in Taiwan, Australia, or Brazil. And I'm sure you remember, I love repeating one of the very first questions that I've received on my first channel. Do you speak Soviet? And how at first I thought it was a ridiculous question, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized that actually a lot of people still speak Soviet. It is not a separate language, but it's a separate mindset. It's a kind of consciousness that lives in constant fear and in this constant desire not to be responsible for their life. So let's discuss all of this in the video, and I'll be happy to read your thoughts, your comments, your observations, because it's amazing how such real communities help exchange and make each other stronger, make each other smarter. So please feel free to express what you think about this video of mine, and remember to subscribe because that's important, and it is the best way to demonstrate your solidarity with Ukraine. It's pretty easy, same as liking this video, sharing this video. But in the world intoxicated with the Russian propaganda, I'm always very happy and grateful to see your reactions. So let's start, and I love beginning these videos on this very personal feedback channel with some memories, personal memories. And I do remember a lot of friends of my grandparents and even my grandparents already living in times of the independent Ukraine, being afraid to speak loud something negative about the government, even about some local authorities. And it was something I could not understand. I could say a joke about, let's say, former President Kuchma, and they would say, don't do that. And you're doing that for example, in your own kitchen, not even somewhere in the center of the city. And that is the heritage they got from a life in the USSR, when literally everything was controlled. Every sentence could result in a sentence. I hope you understand my play of words. I'm playing not in my native language, but I kind of like playing with languages. So it could be a sentence to prison, to a camp, or some problems at work, or some problems in your family members. They always knew this painful areas of your life that they could use, just as they use, for example, right now, children of the people who are on the temporarily occupied territories and who have no choice but to take, let's say, Russian citizenship if they don't want their children to be stolen and taken away and any connection lost. So my grandmother was a brave woman. She was pretty sarcastic. I personally believe I've inherited a lot of her traits. But even she was sometimes worried if I was too active expressing my thoughts at school or elsewhere. Luckily, my generation and many more younger generations of Ukrainians do not know what that is. Even in times of war, with curfew, with Trump speaking negatively about our president, people in Ukraine are free to say what they want. Trust me, you witnessed our Orange Revolution, Revolution of Dignity, and I'm happy that even in times of war, I am not afraid to speak the truth, even if I'm dissatisfied with something. Obviously, there are some things that you're not supposed to share, like the location of some military objects or the places of Russian attacks, because that is simply dangerous and Russians can correct the targets and you know they love double taps. But in general, I am free to criticize anyone I want, and I don't have on my mind that it can bring some negative consequences. And that is a warning sign to my friends in the United States who keep reporting that your social media can be checked. I have friends who deleted some messages on Instagram because they are worried. And of course, you can guess they had a lot of reels and memes about the greatest leader, Donald Trump, or when people are not allowed to enter the United States as tourists, or I don't know, some visiting professors based on the things they shared on social media. And this is not something dangerous. This is not something extremist. This is just their attitude. Jokes about presidents are very normal. And that is one of the reasons why Zelensky won the elections with a party named the Servant of the People. It is named after series, but the essence is that all these politicians are our servants. We hire them, but we can also fire them. That's what we do in Ukraine if we are dissatisfied. And that is one of the greatest fears of Putin. His main reason to attack Ukraine was not NATO. Unfortunately, there is no NATO in Ukraine. It was not even the desire to recreate the Soviet Union or empire. It goes second. But first, this desire to destroy any booming, growing, successful democracies on the borders of the Russian Federation. That is why in 2008 he attacked Georgia. In 2014 he attacked Ukraine. That is the only reason. He is afraid of freedom. He is afraid of the strong middle class. He is afraid of people who have enough food, enough clothes, can travel to the European Union, Australia, or Africa, can see something, and then such people start asking questions. They start giving advice to their politicians. They start criticizing them because they are not in this survival mode, but they are in the normal citizen mode. And that is exactly what we had in Ukraine, and we still have way more than they do in Russia. Recently, I have read one really good article where the lady analyzed this selection of the Russian leaders through history. And a kind reminder, Ukraine had so many presidents during the times of Putin reign. And let's be realistic. In Russia, they had Yeltsin at the beginning, then they had Putin. Medvedev is a substitute, that's something. So literally, they had two real presidents. And in Ukraine, we had Kravchuk, Kuchma, Yushchenko, Yanukovych, Poroshenko, and now Zelensky. Think about that. When speaking about democracy in Ukraine and the need for elections, when 25% of your territory is occupied and literally every city is under constant attacks. But in Russia, they don't have it and they don't have elections. And Putin allows himself to put such questions, and Trump allows himself to repeat what Putin says too often. But let's return back to our topic. And when the Soviet Union collapsed, this lady in her article says that millions of Russians were talking about Gorbachev, and that was the former leader of the USSR, and then for a very short period of time he was the so-called president of something that existed after its collapse. And a lot of Russians described him as a very kind leader that gave us some freedoms. And here is a very important, this like, I'm a linguist, by the way, and the way language shapes the world tells a lot. And your personal speech, the way you select the words to shape your opinions, also tells a lot about you. And here we see that they don't feel that freedom is something that belongs to them. It's not a part of their life. It's not a part of their, like air, like water. It is something that Gorbachev gave, and then the next one can take away. Because you don't treat your political leaders as people who are at work. They are not gods. God is one. And he's not interested, in the Kremlin, as we see. These are workers. You hire them. Okay, they can be smart, they can be successful, they can be inspiring, they can be brave, or they can be funny, primitive, orange. But they are no different than you or me. And they don't give you freedom, you have it. They can try to limit, and then you protest, then you react, then you protect. Because if you don't live in freedom for a number of generations, for decades or hundreds, you become Russian. And I'm not joking here. Generations of Russians do not know what freedom is, and they don't like it. They associate freedom with, chaos. And a lot of these surveys that are conducted by brave researchers, perhaps somehow in disguise inside the Russian Federation, demonstrate that the vast majority of Russians who do support Putin support him because they don't want any responsibilities in their lives. And I'm sorry, freedom is a responsibility. Because if you're free, you have to, support yourself, work for yourself, develop yourself. Nobody's taking care of you. And in Russia, they want to delegate everything, including their will, instead to receive something that they, in a very wrong way, name stability. When everything is predictable, the same from day to day, and you don't have to decide anything, because with every decision comes what? Responsibility. And if you feel that serfdom is your favorite lifestyle, you don't want any responsibilities. You want simple instructions on how to spend your day, and you are happy with that. So millions of Russians keep choosing Putins and Stalins because they want this strong hand Just imagine that you want a strong hand on your throat. That is so wrong. But when you speak with an ordinary Russian and you tell them, like, come on, you can make your street better, you can organize, I don't know, a group chat of people who live on that street, and if your state and your region is too slow or too poor, you can, for example, collect the money and, I don't know, paint the fences or buy new garbage cans to make it all look better. That's exactly what we do in Ukraine. In Russia, no, they don't do it. A very important fact, all these flat chats, that were held in various messengers like WhatsApp, they saved a lot of lives at the very beginning of the Russian invasion, for example, in Kyiv region, because people kept informing each other, their neighbors, what do they see from some of their windows, or those who stayed informed about the state of the flats, those who managed to flee, so many things. By the way, let me know, would you like a separate video maybe about this, like very, very, very household parts of war, but I still consider them very important. And taking into account that this escalation management is not working, that the axis of evil is getting stronger, and my favorite, and I consider our country too, Western leaders are not that determined, apart from the Ukrainian one. So some of this knowledge may be useful to you too. So literally in Russia, why they delegate everything to Putin? Because they want control. They want to seek control. That's why they hate protests. That's why they hate elections, because it can bring some chaos. It can bring some change. It can make you live better than your grandparents did. So it is extremely interesting that one of the main reasons why Russians can start a revolution or a coup or something is the feeling that Putin does not control anything. Because they gave up a lot of things, starting from their income and finishing with their lifestyles, with the way normal people treat this modern image of the country, and many more. And sanctions, because they were guaranteed stability and control. And now we see Putin does not have control. I will enumerate you the things that he lost control of, and I hope in the comments below you will add your observations, because that's interesting to make like a longer list. Maybe some Russians will read and finally realize that they traded their freedom for nothing. So Putin does not control the borders of the Russian Federation. Kursk-Belgorod, hello. Putin does not control the safety and security of strategic military and oil refining objects. Putin does not control air defense. Putin does not control the Black Sea Fleet. Putin does not control airspace of the Russian Federation, and they have to close their airports literally every week. Putin does not control ruble. Putin does not control the Russian banking sector and economy in general. And there are many more things. So when this critical mass of Russians will understand that they don't have stability, they don't have control, and no one takes Russia seriously, because let's be serious. This is the largest country in the world that claimed to have the second strongest army in the world, that has the biggest nuclear arsenal, that has more than 1 million soldiers, and it cannot take one Tennessee during this 11 years already. With the very limited support for Ukraine, with, constant escalation management, various restrictions, we are able to defeat such a giant evil Frankenstein. And if we remain united, if we remain determined, if we clearly see that the heart of many, the majority of the modern global problems is in the Kremlin, then Not only Putin will lose control, but Russia will lose Putin. So let me know what are your thoughts in the comments below, and remember to subscribe and join the community of this channel. Also follow me on other social media platforms. The links you will find in the description of the video. Check our merch shop. There are lots of good items that work well as reminders and conversation starters about Ukraine, and I'm sure you understand we need this attention and support here in Ukraine a lot. Thank you for buying me coffees, becoming my patrons and sponsors of the channel, but most importantly, thank you for standing with Ukraine. Slava Ukraini!